Welcome to the Magnificast with Matt and Dean. This week on the Magnificast, we're going to do two things. First, we'll try to make some sense of the Pope's recent meeting with Donald Trump. Pundits have given this meeting a lot of weird publicity, and we want to get to the bottom of it as a media event. Second, there are also some theological things going on here too. During this meeting, Pope Francis gave Donald Trump a copy of his encyclical, Laudato Si, and since Donald Trump won't actually read it, we thought we'd at least talk about some of the cool stuff in it. So we'll be looking at this meeting as both a media event and a theological event. That's right, this is an entire episode about... To help us understand all of this stuff, we're joined this week by Jon Heaps. Jon is a PhD candidate in systematic theology at Marquette University. Jon's area of expertise is on Bernard Lonergan, Maurice Blondel, and Catholic theology in general. And hopefully with his help, we can get to the bottom of all of this. So, Donald Trump went to go meet the Pope, and I guess that's an interesting thing. And then, all kinds of pundits and news media, said lots of weird things about it. And I guess, out of all those weird things that were said, I guess a sort of a Pope trope emerged, hashtag Pope trope. Of the Pope being kind of like a troll to Donald Trump. And I don't know if that's really true, but Dean took the time to catalog all of those things. So Dean, could you tell us about troll Pope trope?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, let's maybe we can just move through them sort of one at a time here. Disclaimer, I don't necessarily think that the Pope is trolling Donald Trump. However, these are the reasons that people do. So we can, I guess, evaluate them and talk about them a little bit. So the first one, right up front, is Pope Francis made a fat joke about Donald Trump to Melania. So essentially he said, what are you feeding him? Some Slovenian cake. And, some people said, oh, that's a way of whatever, making some small talk, lightening the mood. But other folks keyed in on that as an initial jab, the first punch, if you will, in the cage match between the Pope and the President. What do you think? Troll moment or old man from Argentina moment?
Old man from Argentina moment.
Yeah, I don't know how the Argentinians roll, but if they're Antipodean fellows in Australia are any indication, taking the piss is a long tradition. I think that could be good-natured ribbing. If you can find any ribs in there.
Yeah, okay. So number one, fat joke, I don't know, just average. Normal talk. Second one though, this is sort of scraping deep. Even though he can speak English fluently, the Pope spoke in his native Spanish to Donald Trump. What do you think? Troll moment? Not troll moment.
Troll moment.
Really?
You think so?
Oh yeah, I think so. I think that's a deliberate choice.
Okay, well maybe you guys can explain it to me then, because I saw a YouTube video of Pope Francis once, and he was speaking in English, and he was speaking very slowly, and I couldn't tell if it was just if it was just sort of the way he spoke English, or if he was having a hard time or something. But have you guys seen him speak English fluently before? Is that a thing?
His English is a little rough. But his Italian is great. He has a choice there, right? He's in this kind of diplomatic setting. There's a lot of people around. He can trot out a little bit of English like he did with Obama when he came to the States, or he can speak Italian, given who's in the room in terms of who's helping him from the Vatican. I'm inclined to think that speaking Spanish to Trump was a deliberate choice.
Dean, what do you think?
Interesting. I don't know. It's hard to say. I don't know the Pope very well. Haven't spent a lot of time with him, surprisingly. But yeah, I mean, he can speak English, but I've had the same sort of reaction as you, Matt. When I've heard him speak English, it's been sort of not super clear. Not the kind of thing you'd rely on to talk to Donald Trump. And I kind of feel like the media narrative just seems to me to want to spin Tim Kaine as the ultimate Catholic, speaking Spanish all the time. That's Pope Francis. He's essentially Tim Kaine. But who knows? I mean, I kind of want to believe that he's trolling Donald Trump, obviously, because that would be very funny. But
yeah. So is the troll moment then just that Donald Trump hates Latinx people, so he's going to speak Spanish at him? That's the troll moment there?
Yeah, I mean that's the pundit troll moment for sure.
Right. Okay, the
idea that trolling in the sense of it's let's put it this way. I think it's like diplomacy trolling. Right? This isn't. We're not on 4chan here. He's not going hard for the wolves.
No. That's right.
Vatican trolling.
But this is in the world of diplomacy. These little decisions are significant. They mean stuff. I'm inclined to think that one was a deliberate choice.
Yeah, I mean that's it's okay with me if it is.
Yeah, I want to believe that's true. Okay,
that's true though. I guess if he could have spoken Italian and speaking the choice to speak Spanish means something. Okay, no, I get it. Okay, pundits, you got me.
All right, next one, family photos. We'll go to that. So there's an infamous photo of, people have called it the Addams Family Vatican photo with Donald Trump sitting off to the side, very cranky, and then Donald, Melania, and Ivanka Trump all in black. That got sort of memed around. Troll moment, not troll moment.
I said to you on Twitter, I think it's just resting Pope face.
Yeah, I like resting Pope face theory. I mean, I like the memes, but I don't think it's real. I think it's just like that's the way he looks.
Yeah. So the tweet that John was replying to was me tweeting out a picture of Justin Trudeau and his family there at the Vatican as well, and Pope Francis also making a cranky face. So yeah, I'm gonna say not troll moment, just regular old resting Pope face moment.
I mean, it's a great meme though.
Yeah, I love it. I want it to be true, and also I want him to be angry at Justin Trudeau. So I'm just gonna take it.
That's just the face that he makes whenever, like, I don't know, like Western imperialists come around.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I want. All right, here's probably the ultimate and my favorite troll moment. Even though there's one more at the end, but here's my favorite one. So Trump left the meeting saying, "I'll never forget what he said to me." So that was a big thing, which is obviously false. He forgot 10 minutes after that. But then the Pope left that meeting, and then he gave an address saying, "God does not like to be loved the way a warlord would like," and sort of went on to talk about whatever hope, etc. But really anti-war kind of address. Troll moment, not troll moment.
Yeah, I read that address. I think it's a troll moment. It's I think like right in his face. Again, not a 4chan troll moment, but like Vatican troll moment, diplomacy troll.
Diplomacy troll, that's right. Yeah, I kind of agree. I mean, and it's hard not to read that in retrospect, given the contrast, read it sort of in hindsight, given the contrast between Trump's behavior on the phone with, I'm going to mess up his last name, but the president of the Philippines, or Duterte. With the Saudis, Duterte, yeah, versus how he behaved with Macron and with Angela Merkel and stuff. It's hard not to see the contrast there in Trump's behavior, and like Matt said, to read that address as a pretty direct commentary.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a pretty direct commentary, and it's a good one. It's a good commentary for sure. But I really do hate like the memes and all the articles that came out we're trying to build this like meeting between Donald Trump and the Pope up to be this like really adversarial meeting that had a lot of meaning ingrained in it, even though it might not have actually. Like every article or every time I'd see someone mention it on Twitter or something, they'd be like, it just had like an air of like, well, the Pope's going to set this guy right, or like, the Pope's going to give him the business, and I don't know if that's real. Like there's just it seems like there's like a lot of like I don't know, resentment like up in that, like where like someone's going to tell this guy off. It's not going to be me because I can't do it, but somebody is.
Yeah,
well, that's like I think you hit on it by bringing up resentment, right? Like, so in Kierkegaard's short little book, The Present Age, he talks about in an age of reflection, which he contrasts with a revolutionary age. In an age of reflection, you have this sense all the time that something is just about to happen, that there's all this publicity that some big thing is about to happen, and nothing really ever does. And if anybody did anything that actually was a kind of act of courage or a revolutionary act, everyone would sit around and go, well, I mean, I guess it's all right. I probably could have done it. Right? I mean, that kind of resentment, envy stuff.
Yeah.
And I think part of what was framing that media discourse is publicity, of thinking of these figures as not even just public figures, but figures of publicity.
Yeah.
Who have beefed in the media, and now they're going to be face to face. What's going to happen?
And they represent so much more than like what they actually are too, right? Like the Pope is like the shining bastion of like vague leftist like action in the world, and like he represents to, I think, a lot of people way more than just the Pope.
Yeah, for sure. Also, I think there's something about I think you said it exactly right, man, about how they represent more than they actually are, because there is something about a Latin American Pope, telling off whatever the border building Donald Trump, because that keeps harkening back to their clashes on the campaign trail. And I felt like it was a huge moment of kind of delayed gratification, infinitely delayed, like it keeps getting delayed further and further back. Like, people want the Pope to just be like, no, get out of here, you're the worst, etc. But like, obviously he's not going to do that. He invited him to the Vatican.
Right. Yeah, it's like people are expecting the Pope just to be like, no, you're excommunicated, you're out of here, like you're going to hell. And it's like, yeah, it's not going to go down like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe can we talk about like one particular hot take before we get to the troll moment that will transition our episode a little bit?
Yeah. Sure.
Okay, so there's this one that I found in The Atlantic that drove me crazy. The title of it was Pope Francis Trump Whisperer? ? So most of the article is just like reporting what happened in the meeting. But the way they framed it was this weird idea that Pope Francis has this profound moral aura that just like compels people to change. So in the opening paragraph, they cite two examples. One was when the Pope went to Congress and gave this address, and then John Boehner, he resigned from his position after that. And then I don't understand this example at all, but it also mentioned Bill O'Reilly. He spent, I don't know, according to the article, the morning of his last day with the network, the Fox News network in Rome, where he met Pope Francis in the Vatican receiving line, which apparently he paid to get into, so I don't know. Not great. But anyhow, it's such a weird article, because basically the idea is that Pope Francis just has this kind of moral, like, transformational effect on Republicans, but I don't get it, because John Boehner is still, like, awful and terrible and believes all the bad things he believed before the Pope came, and, like, Bill O'Reilly is still a sex offender, so what?
So the general idea of this, like, this article is that, like, just being around the Pope is going to, like, transform them in some way?
Yeah, right. I mean, Trump whisperer, right? Like, Donald Trump is I don't know, some crazy horse or like a wild dog or something. You just need Caesar, the dog whisperer, to come in and like talk him off the ledge.
I was listening to Ben Wittes on the Lawfare podcast interview somebody, and he was talking about an old Onion video that was about it was spoofing the torture hearings in the W. Bush era. And they were debating the sort of ethical status and the legality of releasing prisoners into a what do you call a labyrinth to be gored by a minotaur. and one of the panelists says, I will not acknowledge the existence of a labyrinth or a minotaur. But if a minotaur did exist, the goring of prisoners by said minotaur cannot be laid at the feet of the president, because he is a beastly minotaur and he cannot be held by any chains. And I think, and Wittes' analogy was to Trump. He was talking about the I think White House counsel or something. But I mean, that is this kind of idea we have of his handlers can't contain him. He tweets just anything he wants.
Yeah.
And so there's this idea that hopefully there'll be some kind of supernatural, mystical, spiritual healer who can come in and chain the Minotaur.
Yeah, like touching the hem of Pope Francis's garment would just sort of heal him of all of his insanity.
Yeah, all jokes aside, this is going to be how Pope Francis makes it into sainthood, is like his sort of mystical handling of Donald Trump, I think.
It'll be the first miracle. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
He's got to rack up some miracles, and a chained Minotaur could be one of them.
Yeah, this is
it's like putting the beast to sleep.
Trump tomorrow is going to donate a bunch of money to the ACLU, and I don't know. like switch parties. I have no idea, but something like that. It's coming. It's happening very soon.
Yeah. Well, anyway, all that to say, this kind of weird mystical power that pundits attribute to Pope Francis is very weird to me. What is the narrative there? That Donald Trump would show up at the Vatican and then Pope Francis would say, "Hey, excuse me, did you know that immigrants are very important?" And Donald Trump would say, "Wow, I'd never thought of it that way."
Now that you mention it, upon further reflection.
Yeah, I'm going to go home and we're not building the wall anymore. Obviously that's not going to happen. Donald Trump can't even, write in a full sentence. He's not compelled by Pope Francis being a nice old man.
I was talking to a buddy of mine who's a historian of American Catholicism at dinner last night, and he was telling me a little bit about, at the end of the 19th century, there was a controversy called the Americanism controversy, and the Pope at the time wrote an encyclical condemning Americanism as a heresy, and the core of the heresy of Americanism is, as my friend was describing it, was really this sense that the only Catholicism that matters and the only political space for Catholicism that matters is the United States. And the interesting thing he said to me was, and part of the reason that this came to the attention of the Pope was because there was this really fundamental failure on the part of some American Catholics to see things from the Vatican point of view, which my friend pointed out to me is a globalist, an internationalist point of view. That we tend to think of Rome as Italian, and there's a kind of predominance of Italian culture in the Vatican in a lot of ways, but still it's a place populated by Catholics from all over the world and staffed by Catholics from all over the world. And so then to frame our understanding of the importance of Pope Francis in terms of what effect he can have on our more unruly lawmakers is a kind of contemporary Americanism, to think that the reason that the Pope has this authority and power is to straighten out our wayward presidents.
Right.
Yeah, also a kind of vague, just American Protestantism, I think. I don't know, what the heck is a Pope? What are popes doing? What do Catholics do? It's like most American Catholics can't tell you what that is, and still less can, American Protestants, and America is a Protestant place, so that makes sense.
Yeah. Even our secularists are awfully Protestant.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, that's great. Whatever. The media is doing its thing. I don't expect any more or less, I guess. However, the last alleged troll moment. So the Pope gave Donald Trump a copy of Laudato Si, his encyclical on the environment, which is a great space for us to talk a little bit about that, and then put all this boring media stuff aside and just chat about that encyclical a little bit. So what do you guys think about that troll moment? Not troll moment.
It's too sincere to be a troll moment.
Okay, I saw this video of Pope Francis giving him the encyclical, and if it wasn't a troll moment, the video just makes it seem like it is so much. This is this great clip of Francis handing him the encyclical and opening it and showing him the pages. It's read
this is how a book works.
yeah. It seemed very condescending. Okay, so it opens, you read it from left to right. And so I don't know if it probably was not a troll moment, but boy, did it seem like one.
But as a gesture, it seems in a way fitting for Francis, because it seems almost naively hopeful.
Yeah, very naively hopeful, because I was just thinking about how earlier this month it was reported that I guess when people prepare a memo for Donald Trump, they put Trump's name specifically in as many paragraphs as possible solely to keep him reading the memo. So they should have given him a special edited Laudato Si, wherein every time it mentions, I don't know, brutal exploitation or something, they mention Donald Trump. That would be very helpful.
It's kind of the feeling, I don't know, when I saw the video, it made me think to moments in class where I assign reading that I know that no one will actually get to. Just well, here you go. I know you won't read this, but
here, let this sit on your laptop until maybe you discover it sometime in your late 20s.
Yeah, that's
and in a fit of despair, read it anyway.
That's right. Yeah. Well, yeah. So Donald Trump probably isn't going to read Laudato Si, which is too bad because he really ought to. Laudato Si is very good and a cool encyclical, and I think is full of stuff that's at least relevant to conversations between like a vague leftism and Christianity. Lots of really good Catholic social teaching stuff in there that is not communist, but sure sounds like it sometimes. So maybe we could talk a little bit about Laudato Si and all of its really good communist parts, and I don't know, all the weird stuff we can leave out, I guess. Nah, JK. There's some stuff I have like no idea what to do with, but there's some stuff that I know exactly what to do with.
Well, can I be an unruly guest and like ask you what those things are? I'm actually like super curious what
parts I want to leave out, or which parts I'm confused.
Or just that like you don't see how they fit, or
no, I don't think it's not that I don't see how they fit. So okay, what I really like about it is that like private property is stupid, or like not in those words, but like that there's like a sort of contention with private property. That's what I really like. What I find like confusing or I don't really understand is the stuff about like the rightly ordered like use of things.
Well, no. So part of what you're bumping up against there is this is gonna. I'm now gonna stammer while I try to remember.
That's okay.
The name of something. So I was asking people to give me some links for just hot takes. Getting ready to talk to you guys, and somebody sent me one that basically said the reason Laudato Si is awesome is because it's the most medieval encyclical we've had in a couple of 100 years. And really what he's referring to is that has a cosmology. Mm-hmm. There's an understanding of the unit. It's Michael Martin writing about Laudato Si on a Catholic blog called Cosmos and the Lost, and it's called the most sophiological encyclical of all, if that means anything to anyone.
I read Bulgakov.
Yeah, buddy.
I've been there.
You've been there.
I mean,
been
like
in that world. And Bonaventure.
There's a good. I mean, all the stuff with the anthropocentrism is good too. It's in terms of like cosmology. In the encyclical, there's a lot of talk about.
So I totally derailed you by asking you about the thing you weren't going to talk about.
Yeah, like what the hell?
Sorry, man. Terrible etiquette.
No, it's fine. There's lots of talk about like the right order, like ordered systems and like the natural order to things, and that always sends off some red flags for me. I don't like natural orders. Because usually what we mean is anthropocentric natural orders, which is, I guess, a cosmological problem.
Well, one of the things you're going to run up against in that document is that if you consider the document, the tendency to do this seems a little strange to say, but I think a lot of people did it when it first came out, is to consider the document atheologically, to only consider it in terms of how it pertains to the relationship between humans and the quote-unquote natural world and politics and economy. And if you consider it in those terms, if you excise the theological from your consideration of it, the document is anthropocentric. Yeah. Because the thing that decenters humanity in nature for the document isn't really primarily other creatures, it's God. That the ordering of all these creatures isn't two humans at the center. The ordering of all the creatures, including the humans, is to God.
Yeah, well, okay. I found what I was looking for, and I want to get back around to that situation about anthropocentrism because I'm very interested. Okay, so in the second section, it's called The Wisdom of Biblical Accounts, and it's like section number 69. Nice. That's
what I'm talking about.
The very last sentence is like context aside, man must therefore respect the particular goodness of every creature to avoid any disordered use of things. And okay, so if we take if we take God as the center instead of like humans or something, then I guess I can like probably negotiate this to my sensibilities or whatever. But the disordered use of things is difficult because it I don't know, man. Like, what are they? Like, what are the disordered uses of things? I'm always, and it makes me think of just Deleuze and like asking questions about like what bodies can do, and especially like people using their bodies in ways like, I don't know, the church doesn't like. So I don't know. That's what I don't like about this, is that it reverts back to this disordered use of things, and there's this like an assumption that like I don't know, the Catholic Church knows what the right ordered use of things are, and I mean, of course they do or whatever, but I don't know, that's what bugged me.
No, that's a reasonable excuse me, a reasonable concern. There's an interesting tension though in Laudato Si where on the one hand, right, you have this operative cosmology, and the operative cosmology is a medieval cosmology. Like, Michael Martin isn't wrong. And so you have this idea of a kind of hierarchy of goods, and so if you value a lower good more than a higher good, you're using that thing in a disordered way, and it's this kind of whole medieval hierarchical thing. But it's also a document that's super positive on science and the scientific method, and has a good handle on science and the scientific method, as an investigatory method. And so Francis spends a lot of time saying, hey, part of the problem here is we just like don't understand the things that we're messing with. And because we don't understand them, we mess them up really, really bad. And so part of what we need to do right in the end when we talk about education and stuff, but also earlier on he hints at it, he says, we need scientists to understand these systems in ways that make it possible for us to not just like put a LEED certification on a building and say we're good, but like actually have renewable habits of economy and polity. So anyway, which is just to say that like, yeah, there's this tension between the heritage of Catholic philosophy and theology having this medieval hierarchical cosmology in the document, but there's also a kind of heuristic attitude that says, hey, part of what's going on here is we just don't like, the world's really complicated, and we don't know what really is going to happen when you dump this stuff in this river, or when you pump these particles into the air, or when you cause ice shelves to drop into the sea, right? And we need to go like learn that stuff about how the world is ordered or structured or operates or systems or whatever. Does that make sense what I'm saying? There's that kind of tension there?
No, it does. John, before you were on the call, Dean and I were talking through, okay, I don't know what section it's in, number 150. Oh, it's in section 3, Ecology of Daily Life. Point 150, and he writes, given the interrelationship between living space and human behaviors, those who design buildings, neighborhoods, public spaces, and cities ought to draw on the various disciplines which help us understand the world, understand people's thought processes, symbolic language, and ways of acting. It's not enough to seek the beauty of design. More precious still is the service we offer to another kind of beauty, people's quality of life, their adaptation to the environment, encounter with mutual assistance. Here, too, we see how important it is that urban planning always take into consideration the views of those who will live in these areas. So, yeah, it is like, there's like, okay, so now that you're saying that sort of like it has a medieval cosmology, like I get it, but there is like this really interesting scientific savvy and just like sociological understanding about design and the use of technology that is not medieval.
Yeah, I was going to say, so you're right, John, that there's a theological component that gets overlooked. But at the same time, so I'm Roman Catholic, so I read this stuff with interest or whatever. But it's the theological stuff that I find sort of the least interesting, and also the thing that is the least translatable. So he opens the encyclical saying, hey, I want to talk to Catholics, but also I want to talk to everyone on the planet. So it's addressed to everybody, right? And most people don't share that cosmology anymore. And I think it's crazy that a leftist publisher like Verso, for example, would republish this encyclical as I forget what they called it, like a letter on inequality or something. But it's those kinds of really interesting leftist themes that are really getting played up that are both making some people excited and also driving some other people insane. And maybe the theological component is a way of, placating people that are getting very upset. But it's also a way of alienating the people who are getting really excited. So, I don't know, that's the kind of thing that sometimes makes you want to back off that part of it.
Well, no, and I understand that, but one of my frustrations with the media coverage of it was particularly in liberal to leftist media that there was a tendency for the the praise of the document to be in the line of this is great and Francis is great because he is saying all the things that I already think are true. Francis is great because he agrees with me. And I think one of the real challenges of really actually engaging with what he has to say is recognizing that maybe he doesn't actually, because he's coming out of a tradition and an imaginary that might not actually, if you really want to engage with it in a kind of robust way and not in a media, not just a kind of what would you call it, like mass media way, you're going to bump up with there's going to be some tension here. There's there's a different episteme at work.
I mean, this is me exactly, right? Like I like the cool leftist stuff, but I'm not so down with the theology because I don't know, I don't get it. But that is true. I'm not engaging with it in a robust way. And I only am interested in the parts where I think he agrees with me, but it could be very well the case where he doesn't, or I don't agree with him. I don't know.
Well, but that's part of what I think is so interesting about this conversation is that that you and Francis can agree differently. That's interesting to me, right? Because if you're going to have a leftist politics that isn't just another ideology, right? That isn't just a kind of just another kind of toe the line set of beliefs and linguistic practices that people have to have their subjectivity ordered by. Then there's going to have to be ways in which you can really have coordinated political action on things like this where people agree differently. We're going to agree that this is an important thing to work on, global warming or whatever, but we're going to agree to cooperate on it for maybe incommensurable reasons.
Yeah.
I think the challenge though is okay, climate change is something that we can all agree on differently because we have to live here for right now, right? At least.
Yeah.
If we don't agree, we'll burn ourselves out of this place, and that's not good. So I don't care how people agree with that, just please do. But when you get to other things, this is a sort of perennial problem I have with Catholic social teaching as a person who is formed by that, but also other things. When we talk about actual political economy, sometimes we can't just agree differently. Sometimes it's this is just how it has to be, and that's an incommensurable difference that leads to incommensurable polities, right? And there's a lot that Catholic social teaching offers that leftists have rightly grabbed onto in the 20th century, or that has made Catholics seem more leftist, if you want to put it that way. But at the same time, it's like class harmony. That's not a thing that I want. And sometimes those kinds of things peer through Pope Francis's writings as well. So that's the tension that also I find really interesting in that text. It's a really confused sort of document in general, Laudato Si. At one point, Pope Francis is talking about these grave inequalities, but then you never hear him saying and that's why we should be outright socialists, right? He doesn't want to use that kind of language, but he does want to criticize capitalism. And it's this kind of third wayism that I think can sort of forestall building those necessary kind of coalitions where we can agree differently about the same kind of polity. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, some of that's genre. Some of that is That's what I mean. That's a frustration I've heard many times before about Catholic social teaching, and part of that is the genre of the encyclical, which they often use a lot of words to not say very much, and part of that has to do with the genre of speaking to. I mean, this is part of what I find so fascinating about Catholicism is that you have people tend to think of Catholicism as, okay, well, they rightly perceive Catholicism as hierarchical, at least as a polity. But they mistake Catholicism for being a centralized hierarchy. They think, well, you've got Rome at the center, and you've got Francis who's in charge, and he tells his cardinals what to do, and then the cardinals tell the bishops what to do, or whatever, right? However they think about how the sort of Fordian bracket of authority works. Right. But it's not. It's this like crazy confederation of societies and movements and devotions to this and so on and so forth. And so it's this very kind of constantly roiling global body. And so when you write an encyclical to, all right, bracket the whole earth, just to the whole church, you don't have to, I suppose, but popes have chosen to, for the most part, on these kinds of issues that have to do with economy and with polity, in very broad terms, and say, look, people of goodwill can disagree about exactly which policies to pursue here on this, but these are what our values need to be. And so we might wish that the genre operated differently, but I think in some ways, at least, as a matter of fact, that's what the genre is.
So if I can push back just a tiny bit, I think that's all the points you just made are very good, and I agree with that entirely. But so I'm just going to negate all the nice things I said to you. But yeah, like for example, Catholic social teaching values, like I mentioned earlier, class harmony, right? And intentionally against Marxism, against anarchism, against all leftist discourses that think that classes are not in harmony and they shouldn't be in harmony. They should actually just be abolished. So Pope Francis, I mean, he's formed by a Marxist current of liberation theology in part, and you can see him wrestling with his own tradition in that way. It comes out in this encyclical, and it comes out in other writings as well that he's done. And he's always kind of finding ways to, like, I think, push the tradition that basically, he has to deal with a little further left as far as the elasticity can sort of take it. But thankfully, like, I'm not the Pope, so I don't have to do that in the same way. So I guess, yeah, that's what I'm wondering about. What do you think about problems like class harmony? There are others, but that's just the easiest one to pick on if you're a leftist, because it's like intentionally oppositional. That's like a value that I just don't want. Like, I don't want people to agree on it, and I don't want them to have it. I just want to get rid of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the questions that come up for me on that question in particular has to do with what the philosophy of history at work is. So is there a way of thinking about class conflict in these sort of paleo-Marxist ways, where you have a kind of Hegelian mechanism at work behind class conflict, or do you want to think of the rejection of class harmony? It sounds like more like the terms you're thinking of, where simply you have a kind of radical rejection of inequality, and these are conversations that are part of the mainstream in social justice circles in Catholicism. There's a guy I know at Marquette who is with you. He thinks that those kinds of affirmations are in contradiction with the other fundamental values of the preferential option for the poor, of solidarity, even subsidiarity. I've heard arguments made. So I don't think that's like not a mainstream position within the dialogue going on within Catholicism right now about those questions. But
thank you. I appreciate that affirmation.
I think that's true. Now, do I think we're going to hear from a pope within the next century and a half? Probably not.
Yeah.
But those are the timescales that Catholicism works on. So could we in 150 years? Maybe, depending on how things play out in the sort of ongoing internal dialogue that is Catholic theology. Can I shove us in a direction real quick?
Yeah, please.
I want to. Yeah, right. I want to talk about Eurocentrism.
Yeah, let's do that.
Because one of the things that really bothers me about the way that Francis is covered is, and even treated by theologians who should know better, is that the issues theologically that he engages with are considered almost entirely in terms or within the frame of a kind of Eurocentric outlook. And in some super naive ways. I mean, so not in Laudato Si, but in Amoris Laetitia, the sort of footnote about admitting divorced persons to the Eucharist. There's this huge, I was going to come up with a more sophisticated word, but kerfuffle about this. And it's pitting sort of, North Atlantic liberals and conservatives against each other within theology. And I've yet to bump into a take where any of them, left or right, frankly, like consider the station of divorced women in sub-Saharan Africa or in small villages in Bolivia, or like the treatment of these issues is all seen very much like we were talking about with Trump, right? The kind of Americanism of us considering the value of Pope Francis being in terms of how he can fix our politics. Mm-hmm. The consideration of these issues is very much about like, well, how is this going to, if we did that, how would it affect how many people that Coca-Cola employs? And it's like, to me, that's the more radical thing in Francis's approach is, in a way, maybe we have our first, at least broadly non-Eurocentric Pope in the Catholic Church. And I think that's a bigger break that doesn't get enough play in the discussion. That you have somebody who has not only just sort of like seen the global South, but who's actually administrated and lived in the global South and had to know what it's like to, there's the old Barry Crimmins joke about if you don't, if you hate America so much, why don't you leave? And he would say, because I don't want to become a victim of its foreign policy. That's, Francis is someone who's seen the realities of that in South America in his lifetime.
Yeah.
And I think that's really significant.
I think that's interesting. I don't know. The tough thing, I guess, that I find with some of that approach to Francis is that, I don't know that I don't know that saying we shouldn't admit divorced couples to the Eucharist or whatever. I don't know that commits you to also not caring about divorced couples elsewhere or divorced people elsewhere, for example. Like, I'm from a divorced Catholic family. It would be awesome if from my life, it would be really cool if it turned out that, however we want to call them, the progressives, the liberals, etc., in the Catholic Church won that debate, because, there's a lot of stigma in a rural American town against divorced Catholic parents, right? But it's like, I don't know, there's sometimes the way that these things get framed, not that you're doing this necessarily, but I've heard it among especially more sort of conservative traditional Catholics on the internet, who, they'll say this kind of anti-Eurocentric Pope in this way, it complicates the narratives that we have, and that's true. But it isn't necessarily radical for someone to preserve those non-Eurocentric ways of life if they also are not super great in the same way, right? I don't know. It's a very complicated question to sort out, more complicated than.
All I meant to, I'm not so much meaning to get into the nitty gritty of that controversy, only to point out that in the media treatment of the controversy, the framing of the controversy is all about the divorce rates in North Atlantic developed nations.
Yeah. No, right. That's true.
And so the whole framing of the whole thing is Eurocentric. But anyway, we don't have to get into that because that's a whole other bag of worms. My only point is just that in Laudato Si, you have a consideration of the consequences. This was another great rhetorical line, was talking about the ecological debt that the developed world has to the places that it goes to get its natural resources and to get its cheap labor, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I see what you mean. I'm on board. I'm into it now.
Yeah.
I was anxious for personal reasons, but now I'm okay with it.
No, and that's understandable. And there's a conservative move. There's a theologically conservative move that wants to point to how conservative the bishops are from Uganda or wherever.
Yeah, exactly.
That I have no truck with that.
Cool. We're friends.
We're still friends. But do you see what I'm saying? Like that this could have. I mean, yeah, he's got lines about like air conditioning, but it could have been this. It could have been a document about the personal responsibility of first world consumers to make good choices, and there's stuff in there about that. But there's also some like real critiques of global systems of like political engagement and global systems of economic interconnectedness that are surprising to see from a papal document.
There is a really funny, I don't know if it's funny, it's funny to me. There's a funny section where the Pope talks a lot about the internet.
Oh yeah.
Sorry, you said air conditioning, but like even more, like there is it's like in section 4, number 47. He talks about the omnipresent digital world, which I appreciate that language for a lot of reasons. Anyways, he says about the internet that we should be concerned that alongside the exciting possibilities offered by these media, a deep melancholic dissatisfaction with interpersonal relations or a harmful sense of isolation can also arise. It's just like it's like a funny sort of like insertion into like this like larger critique about like social inequality and global like warming. Then it's like also like people might feel sad on the internet. And sorry, it's just like a funny diversion where it's like it was very serious, and then some like notes about the internet. Not that the internet isn't serious business. I would never say that. Just like in the grand scheme of the encyclical, it seems out of place to me.
Really upbeat, man.
It is very much that though.
Well, no, I mean that's but I think there's an element there where like it's this kind of flat-footedness we see over and over again all over the place about digital media. That's just repetitions of the complaints that happened when novels came out and then when radio came out, and like just the same kind of like, well, now no one's going to sit around the fire and tell stories anymore.
Right.
And meanwhile people are listening to your podcast, this like really intimate thing of these voices right in their ear, right?
Yeah.
So, it's like, yeah, it's a little bit out of place, and also it's a little like, well, maybe it's been around for like a minute. We'll see.
Yeah. I mean, I think that like he's probably right. Like, I don't know, the internet probably does cause
Facebook makes me sad.
Yeah, I mean, I've been sad plenty of times on the internet, so he might be right. It's just like, I don't know. Okay, sorry, that was a digression.
There you go. There's your merch idea, guys. There's your Patreon merch idea. Just like, are you sad on the internet? And then resting Pope face.
Resting Pope
face.
Right. Yeah. Anyways,
RPF.
Not important digression there, Dean. What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say,
when the hell do we get to talk about private property? I've been waiting.
Yeah.
Oh, let's go.
I was gonna say private that.
Property.
Okay, good. Okay, so John and Dean, you guys have a lot of very good and well-informed opinions on Catholic theology that I think are over my head. But what I want to really bring to light here isn't it just like wild, y'all, that there's like some notes in here against private property? I liked that. That seemed pretty cool. So I'm going to say how cool it is, and then John and Dean, you guys can tell me about how it's actually not that cool or something. So this is in section 6, the common destination of goods. in number 93.
New band name, Common Destination of Goods.
Yeah, no kidding. So he writes, "The Christian tradition has never recognized the right to private property as absolute or inviolable, and has stressed the social purpose of all forms of private property. St. John Paul II forcefully reaffirmed this teaching, stating that God gave the earth to the whole human race for the sustenance of all of its members, without excluding or favoring anyone. These are strong words. He noted that a type of development which did not respect and promote human rights, personal and social, economic and political, including the rights of nations and peoples, would not be really worthy of man. He clearly explained that the Church does indeed defend the legitimate right to private property, but he also teaches no less clearly that there is always a social mortgage on all private property, in order that goods may serve the general purpose that God gave them." So that is a very cool thing to say, and that got me excited about this. And so why is this not as cool as I think it is? You guys just let me down easy.
I think the turn of phrase "social mortgage" on private property is just exactly as cool as you think it is. That phrase is amazing.
Yeah,
I love that.
Also, the inviolability, like saying that property is not inviolable, I appreciate. Like, the Pope is genuinely opening up the door for expropriation. That's a real thing.
Yeah, I think so. But okay, so Pope Francis, as he's the Marxist Pope, as Alex Jones says. But John Paul II said this. So, like, what's up with that?
The hilarious thing is he's being traditional. This is the traditional position in Catholic theology about private property: is your right to it isn't absolute. Your labor didn't ex nihilo create your property, and you thus don't have total sovereignty over it. Because in Catholic theology, humans don't get to have total sovereignty over anything. So, I mean, that the reason JP2 can be quoted to that effect is because JP2 was a traditionalist.
Yeah, I guess that's cool. I guess though it probably really isn't opening the door to expropriation though, right? Like
it is not really opening the door to expropriation.
No, I disagree. 100% expropriation.
It's saying expropriation isn't what's the Catholic moral theology phrase? It's not an intrinsic evil.
There you go.
So
that's really all I want.
It's just for it not to be an intrinsic evil?
Intrinsically evil, that means it could be pretty good.
You have stepped right on over that bar, my friend.
Yeah, I'm not worried about it. I don't do theology, so I stay in my lane, and then when I get out of my lane, people get very upset, and I don't really get why, and it doesn't bother me, so...
Well, I don't know. I appreciate it, I guess, on a number of levels, especially between this bit here about the social mortgage in private property and not being it being not absolute, and then going back to the bit at the beginning about this that we didn't really talk about, but the bit about anthropocentrism. I really appreciate all of that insofar as like your private property isn't more important than like ecology or whatever like that, or, whatever. It just seems like a really helpful note to make, especially for American Christians. If this is addressed to the entire world, it's really good for us in North America to hear, I think, at this point.
No, I agree with that. I think the linkage of anthropocentrism here with that concern about private property and with broader concerns about sort of the use of the created order, these things are just like deeply essential to. I mean, I keep taking it because I know you guys. I know you want me to be more political, but this is not my training is in this theology and philosophy stuff.
No, it's fine.
But I think if you're going to have a kind of Christian piety, a Christian sort of way of life, way of comporting yourself, this scam that's been pulled, linking together these kind of Enlightenment views about the relationship between work and property, tying that somehow to Christian moral life is totally bonkers. It's a really incoherent thing that everyone seems to have just tolerated for a few hundred years. And I've found it really baffling for a while that anybody can read the tradition, particularly the Catholic tradition, and be like, yeah, but I can also vote for a stand your ground law so that I can take someone's life in order to defend my property. I just find
John, do you know about a thing called the Acton Institute?
I do know the Acton Institute.
Okay, good. For those of you that don't, I lived in Grand Rapids, Michigan for a little while, where the Acton Institute lives, or leeches off of the life force of the universe to sustain its Voldemort-like power. Anyway, Acton Institute is a Catholic-led but hilariously ecumenical think tank devoted to explaining why you too could be Catholic and very libertarian. It's gross. I don't know. Tangent over. I just felt like I should mention that as a backup to your frustrations, as a material example of something very bad.
No, but
it's a thing out there, and I don't get it. And there's genealogies that people have done about where these things come from, and somehow everything is Duns Scotus's fault. But or sometimes it's William of Ockham. I can't keep up. But yeah, it seems nuts to me.
Yeah, this is actually, I don't know, touching on like a chapter of my dissertation, so I don't want to talk about it too much because this is like my project, man. Private property. I mean, so not like in a theological sense, just like in like a common sense sort of way. Like private property is just assumed to be so like, first of all, like doable, and also so central to our life that we don't think about it more, that we don't like question it more, is really very strange. That like. That we can just like claim a piece of land and like because we did some type of like magic over it as our own is like is completely weird. I don't know. It's like there's an aesthetic move that's like happening for us that's not happening like metaphysically like we think, and I don't know. Someone should figure it out.
Okay, so is there one passage in all of Laudato Si that you would want Donald Trump to read? Like if his memo people had to put his name in one section of Laudato Si, what would it be?
Oh, geez. Okay, so here it is. Chapter 6, Part 1, number 204 in this crazy numbering scheme. Here it goes. The current global situation engenders a feeling of instability and uncertainty, which in turn becomes a seedbed for collective selfishness. When people become self-centered and self-enclosed, their greed increases. The emptier a person's heart is, the more he or she needs things to buy, own, and consume. It becomes almost impossible to accept the limits imposed by reality. In this horizon, a genuine sense of the common good also disappears. Footnote, Donald Trump.
Now I'm sad.
No, put it right in the paragraph. He's got to read it.
He's what?
Sorry, he's not looking at footnotes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, in the current global situation, engenders a feeling where Donald Trump makes you feel unstable and uncertain, which in turn becomes a seedbed for collective selfishness. Then Donald Trump would read to Chapter 6, Part 204. Yeah, man. Now I'm sad on the internet. That's right.
I'm sad on the internet.
Anyways, after that, Francis says, like, you shouldn't just be concerned with extreme weather events, but also but also an obsession with consumerism. Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I also would like Donald Trump to read that part. But ironically, going by what the Pope said here, it's very unlikely that he will.
What medium would, like, so Aquinas says, right, what is received according to the mode of the receiver. What medium could Donald Trump receive the message of Laudato Si?
KFC chicken bowls.
Like at the bottom of one. Like
like
printed
that.
on the bottom.
Yeah, a little obscured by grease, though.
Like, how would you condense it to
so that he's interested, right? Because he can't quite see, so he's got to like. I like that. That could work.
I think that'd be good.
He only sees through a puddle of grease darkly, but later on, when he cleans it, he'll see it in full.
Orange face to face.
Yeah, Francis even goes on to say, no system can completely suppress our openness to what is good, true, and beautiful. No amount of KFC grease can completely obscure our God-given ability to respond to His grace at work deep in our hearts. So I think that you guys are right. I think that's the way to go.
I'm glad we solved it.
Well, John, thanks for being on this podcast. It was fun. It was a good time. I'm glad we turned out to be friends. I was worried for a second there, but that's my own fault because I know too many bad people on the internet.
I took one of those weird Catholic third ways and it threw you.
It's true. I'm not a third way guy. I'm a left way guy. Gotta go left. That's the only way to go.
Well, thanks, guys. It was a blast.
Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
Thanks for listening to Magnificast. Don't forget to sign up for the Paul Virilio Summer Reading Group. That starts on July 11th. You can sign up on our Patreon account for $1. Also, don't forget to follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook, tell your friends, tell your mom, organize against your boss, and leave us a nice little review on the old iTunes. Okay, thanks for listening.
Church in the morning, souls alive. Heaven come to earth and there won't be no church. We'll meet down by the riverside. There we'll swim with all creation. Never get tired, never bored. Don't worry, someday there'll be no dam between